There's a photograph on Jennifer Tower's Facebook page posted on October 5th, 2016. In it, Jennifer and Robbie Tower are standing in Ukraine. They're smiling, the kind of smile that comes not from a camera prompt, but from the inside. The kind of smile that belongs to people who have just done something that feels deeply, completely right. They had gone to Ukraine as missionaries. They had gone to serve. But they were coming home with something they had not planned on: a son. His name was Dima. He was 14 years old. He had lost his mother before he was 10. His father had abandoned him. He had spent years in an orphanage where, by family accounts, he rarely had enough to eat and wore bruises that nobody had put there gently. And Jennifer and Robbie Tower looked at this boy and saw not a risk, not a project, not a charity case, but a child who deserved a family. They brought him home to Northport, Florida. They gave him their name. They gave him their love. They gave him a car, a citizenship, a future. They forgave him when he hurt them, and then they forgave him again. On the night of August 31st, 2023, while Jennifer and Robbie slept in the home they had built together, the home they had opened to a child who had nowhere else to go, Dima Tower made a choice that cannot be explained by any single cause and cannot be forgiven by any simple understanding. Jennifer Tower was 51 years old. Robbie Tower was 49. They never woke up. This is their story. Before we dive into tonight's case, if you're new here, make sure you subscribe, because on this channel, we uncover the truth behind the world's most chilling true crime cases. From shocking mysteries to courtroom twists and untold details, every story is carefully broken down so you can see what really happened. If you're fascinated by real investigations, hidden motives, and cases that will leave you thinking long after the video ends, you're in the right place. Now, let's get into today's case. Jennifer Christine Tower grew up in a family defined by faith, warmth, and a deep sense of responsibility toward others. Her brother Michael Burgoon described a childhood of video games and beach walks at Siesta Key, of daily phone calls and texts that simply said, "I love you." She was the kind of sister who stayed close, the kind of person who kept her relationships tended and alive. Robbie Tower's uncle, Warren Rhines, described the couple as two really good, caring people. Robbie had a sense of humor that his brother-in-law Michael immediately connected with. He was the kind of man who gave advice freely and received it graciously. The kind of man who made the people around him feel steadier simply by being present. Together, Jennifer and Robbie built a life in Northport, Florida, that was rooted in their Christian faith and oriented outward, toward service, toward community, toward the needs of people beyond their own front door. They went on multiple mission trips to Ukraine, not as tourists, not as observers, as people who believed that faith without action was incomplete, that belief meant something only if it changed the way you moved through the world. The couple, unable to have children on their own, adopted Dima from an orphanage in Ukraine. When Jennifer and Robbie first met the Ukrainian boy who would eventually become Dima James Tower, they were Christian missionaries visiting the Eastern European nation, and he was a local teenager with a dead mother and an absent alcoholic father. Warren Rhines described the conditions Dima had been living in before the adoption. He would have bruises on him in the orphanage. When they went out to eat, he would have like 6 hot dogs. He wasn't getting a lot to eat. These orphanages are like prison for kids. The Towers saw all of that, the hunger, the bruises, the years of accumulated loss, and they did not hesitate. Talitha Pollock, a friend of the family, later said at sentencing, "I can promise you she could not have loved you more, Dima, than as if she had given birth to you herself." That is not a eulogy written for effect. That is the testimony of someone who watched Jennifer Tower love that boy in real time, with the full, unguarded, unglamorous love of a mother who chose her child deliberately and completely. The years between Dima Tower's arrival in Northport and the night of August 31st, 2023, were not simple. They were not the clean, redemptive arc that adoption stories are sometimes shaped into for public consumption. They were complicated and difficult, and marked by a pattern of escalating concern that the Tower family navigated with a combination of hope, forgiveness, and a love that sometimes looked from the outside like it was being extended further than it could safely reach. Dima Tower was 14 years old when he was adopted by the couple from Ukraine in 2016. He arrived in Florida without knowing English. He enrolled in school, struggled academically, and by 10th grade had dropped out of high school. He had difficulty with authority, difficulty with structure, difficulty with the ordinary friction of family life, the kind of friction that most teenagers absorb without catastrophe, but that for Dima seemed to accumulate differently. A classmate described how Dima Tower picked fights with students. Warren Rhines said, "When I first met him, he was interested in boxing, but he didn't want to box. He wanted to hit. He wanted to hurt." Records revealed Dima had a history of violence dating back to 2018, when the victims called police to report that Dima had pushed Jennifer. In 2019, Robbie told police he wanted Dima removed from the home and said he slept with his door locked at night out of fear. That detail, a father sleeping with his door locked in his own home out of fear of his own son, is one of the most quietly devastating facts in this entire case. It tells us that the danger was not invisible. It was felt. It was real enough to change behavior, to alter the most basic rhythms of daily life in that house. Dima went to live with Jennifer Tower's relatives for a while, but the couple later forgave him. Warren Rhines said, "That's how much he loved him. They forgave him for everything. They bought him a car, whatever he wanted or needed. The forgiveness was real. The love was real." And on August 31st, 2023, neither was enough. Police were called to the Tower's Northport, Florida home on August 31st, 2023, after a 911 caller reported a woman banging on her door, screaming, "I need help." The neighbor said that a woman knocked on her door 5 minutes before the call and screamed, "I need help, I need help." But when the caller opened the door, she did not see the woman, only a large amount of blood on the front steps. Tower admitted in court testimony that he first attacked his adoptive father Robbie while he slept, then pursued his adoptive mother Jennifer when she fled to a neighbor's house for help. He told the court he had made her sit on the couch and explained what he had done to Robbie before attacking her as well. When officers arrived, they found Tower covered in blood, loading items into his car. He allegedly ignored their commands to stop and fled in the vehicle, entering the oncoming lanes of Toledo Blade Boulevard before fleeing onto I-75. The vehicle ultimately fled north on I-75, where it was forced to a stop. Tower then exited the vehicle and fled on foot into the nearby woods. After a more than 7-hour-long manhunt, Tower was located near I-75 and Laurel Road and taken into custody. Inside the home, Jennifer and Robbie Tower were gone. The investigation that followed moved with the grim efficiency of a case in which the evidence was overwhelming from the very first hours. Investigators testified that Tower's DNA was found on one knife and his father's blood on another. DNA analysts matched blood found on 2 knives to the victims and the defendant. The physical evidence was unambiguous. The testimony of the neighbor who had heard Jennifer screaming was unambiguous. The chase across county lines was unambiguous. And then, in November 2025, Dima Tower did something that no one, not even his own defense attorney, had anticipated. He took the stand. Tower took the witness stand in his own defense, confessing to prosecutors that he planned and carried out the August 31st, 2023 murders using kitchen knives. Cameras captured Tower confessing that he planned the attack, killing his father Robbie as he slept. The prosecution referenced Tower's own testimony, in which he said he was boiling with rage. Prosecutors said Tower grabbed a second knife when he lost the first one and delivered a monologue to his mother on the couch before finishing what he had started. When asked what he was thinking as he walked into his parents' bedroom with a knife, Tower answered, "I wasn't thinking anything. What is there to think?" That answer, delivered in a courtroom, under oath, to a prosecutor asking about the moments before he ended 2 lives, is one of the most chilling pieces of testimony in recent Florida criminal history. Not because it reveals a monster, but because it reveals an absence. An absence of the interior experience that most human beings bring to moments of irreversible consequence. An absence that the defense would attempt to explain through the lens of trauma, and that the prosecution would argue was simply the absence of remorse. Tower's defense attorney asked jurors to consider a manslaughter conviction, arguing Tower was temporarily insane and emotionally scarred after being abandoned as a child in Ukraine before his adoption in 2015. The jury deliberated, and they were not persuaded. Dima Tower was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, as well as fleeing from police. This case demands a psychological conversation that is neither simple nor comfortable, and it demands that we have it honestly, without collapsing into easy conclusions in either direction. Dima Tower's early life was genuinely traumatic. His mother died before he was 10 years old. His father abandoned him. He moved in with different relatives in Ukraine following his mother's death, before living in an orphanage until the Towers adopted him at 14. He arrived in a new country without language, without cultural context, without the foundational emotional architecture that secure early attachment builds in children. The research on early childhood trauma and its long-term effects on neurological development, emotional regulation, and relational functioning is extensive and well-established. Children who experience the level of abandonment and institutional care that Dima experienced carry those experiences into every subsequent relationship, not as excuses, but as deeply embedded patterns that shape how they perceive safety, threat, love, and anger. None of that explains what he did on August 31st, 2023. Trauma is a context. It is not a verdict. Millions of people carry profound childhood trauma through their lives without harming the people who love them. The presence of trauma in Dima Tower's history does not create a direct line to the deaths of Jennifer and Robbie Tower, and treating it as though it does would be both psychologically inaccurate and deeply unfair to the survivors of childhood trauma who do not become perpetrators. What the psychological record of this case does suggest is a young man whose capacity for emotional regulation had never been adequately developed, who moved through his adolescence and early adulthood with a pattern of explosive anger that was noticed, documented, and responded to with forgiveness, rather than with the kind of intensive, sustained therapeutic intervention that the warning signs warranted. The pattern of violence beginning in 2018, Robbie sleeping with his door locked in 2019, the removal from the home and the subsequent return. Each of these moments was a fork in the road, a place where a different response might have altered what came next. That is not blame. It is the painful, honest acknowledgement that patterns of escalating violence rarely arrive without warning, and that the systems available to families navigating those patterns are frequently inadequate. What makes this case particularly heartbreaking from a psychological standpoint is the quality of love that Jennifer and Robbie Tower extended. It was not naive love. It was not love without evidence of the risk. It was love that saw the risk clearly. Robbie sleeping behind a locked door tells us that, and extended itself anyway. Because they believed in the possibility of this young man. Because they had made a commitment. Because they were, by every account, people whose faith demanded that they not give up on a child they had chosen as their own. That love was real, and it was not enough. And both of those things are true at the same time. The Tower case landed in the public conversation at a moment when discussions about international adoption, childhood trauma, and the support systems available to adoptive families were already gaining serious attention. International adoption from countries like Ukraine, Russia, and other Eastern European nations, has a long and complicated history. A history that includes both genuinely transformative stories of children finding loving homes and profoundly difficult stories of families ill-equipped to manage the complex needs of children who have experienced significant early trauma. The Tower case does not indict adoption as an institution, but it does force a serious conversation about what adoptive families, particularly those bringing older children from institutional care settings, need in terms of ongoing support, therapeutic resources, and honest preparation for the challenges ahead. The warning signs in this case were documented as early as 2018. Police reports existed. A pattern of escalating behavior was known to law enforcement, known to the family, known to the community around them. And yet the mechanisms available to intervene in a meaningful, sustained way were insufficient. The question of what could have been different, what resources, what interventions, what support structures might have altered the trajectory of this family, is not one that has easy answers. But it is one that the Tower case makes impossible to avoid. Judge Thomas Krug, in sentencing Dima Tower, said, "It is a shame that in this great country that we live in, that we lost two shining stars." He sentenced Tower to life in prison without the possibility of parole, calling him an evil spirit. At the sentencing, the people who had loved Jennifer and Robbie Tower stood up one by one and bore witness to who they had been. Not who they had become in the headlines, not the victims in a true crime documentary, but the actual human beings whose lives had filled rooms with warmth and laughter and the particular light that comes from people who choose every day to love generously. Talitha Pollock looked directly at Dima Tower in the courtroom and said, "You were a nobody from nowhere, but two amazing people from somewhere came to save you." That statement is not without its complexity. It carries the raw, unfiltered grief of someone who watched two people she loved pour everything they had into a young man who ultimately destroyed them. It is not a measured sociological observation. It is a human being in pain, speaking the only language available to grief in that moment. And it deserves to be heard exactly as it was spoken. Jennifer Tower beamed when she told people about adopting Dima. That is the word her friend Talitha Pollock used. She beamed. Not with the careful pride of someone who wanted to be seen doing a good thing, with the genuine, uncontainable light of someone who had found exactly what they were looking for. A child to love, a family to complete, a purpose that aligned perfectly with everything they believed about what a life well lived looked like. Robbie Tower was proud when Dima received his United States citizenship. Warren Rhines, Robbie's uncle, described him forgiving Dima for a violent incident because, in Rhines's words, that is how much he loved him. They bought him a car, whatever he wanted or needed. These were not perfect people, no one is. But they were, by every account available, people who gave this young man more than most people would have given, more than many people could have given. And they gave it not because it was easy or because it always felt safe. Robbie's locked bedroom door tells us it did not always feel safe, but because they had made a commitment and they intended to honor it. Jennifer Tower was 51 years old. Robbie Tower was 49. They are gone. And the home they built in Northport, the life they constructed around faith and service and an open-armed love that crossed oceans to find a child who needed it, all of it was taken in a single night by the very person that love was meant for. Dima Tower will spend the rest of his life in prison, 2 consecutive life sentences. He will grow old in a cell, and whatever understanding of what he did, whatever reckoning with the reality of 2 people who loved him and whom he killed, that is something only he can account for in the decades ahead. For the people who loved Jennifer and Robbie, the work is the work of grief, of learning to live inside an absence that will never fully close, of carrying 2 people forward in memory because there is no other way to carry them now. Michael Burgoon, Jennifer's brother, recalled how the 2 grew up playing video games, walking the beach at Siesta Key, and often racing go-karts. As they grew older, they would call daily or simply send a text to say, "I love you." That is who Jennifer Tower was before she became a headline, before she became a case, before her name was typed into a YouTube search bar by people trying to understand what happened in Northport, Florida, on August 31st, 2023. She was a sister who sent daily texts that said, "I love you." She was a woman who flew to Ukraine and came home with a son. She was, by every measure that actually matters, a person who made the world around her better, warmer, safer, more cared for, simply by being in it. Jennifer Tower deserved to grow old. Robbie Tower deserved to grow old. They deserved every ordinary, unremarkable morning that was stolen from them. Every cup of coffee and every phone call and every Sunday and every quiet evening in the home they had built together. They deserved better than the night of August 31st, 2023. And the least we can do, the very least, is say their names. Remember who they were before the tragedy. Refuse to let the manner of their deaths become more important than the fullness of their lives. Jennifer Tower, Robbie Tower, two shining stars. May they rest in the peace they spent their lives trying to give to everyone around them. If this story stayed with you, if Jennifer and Robbie's names are going to be in your mind today, please take one moment right now to hit the like button and share this video. Stories like this one deserve to be more than a passing headline. They deserve the kind of sustained attention that keeps the memory of real people alive long after the news cycle has moved on. Subscribe to this channel and turn on your notifications. Every week we bring you careful, deeply researched, respectful documentary storytelling about cases that demand more than shock value. Cases about real human beings whose lives mattered and whose stories carry lessons worth sitting with. This is not true crime for entertainment. This is true crime for understanding, for awareness, for the families who are still grieving and who need to know that the world has not forgotten. Drop Jennifer and Robbie's names in the comments. Let their family know they are remembered. Rest well, Jennifer. Rest well, Robbie.